Okay, do you guys have any questions before we get started? All right, after last class, one of the things you'll probably notice is I ask you guys a lot of questions. And I do that for one primary reason, is to keep you engaged. I know what it's like to be a student. I put these notes up and sometimes you just get in tunnel vision and you're writing and not thinking. So I try to break up this with questions to sort of pull you back in. Now, you're taking this class because you don't know everything about this topic, right? So when I ask you questions, I know as a student when a professor asks you a question, you feel like you should know it, right? You should be able to give the answer back. I actually expect you guys to have the wrong answer. You're not supposed to know this stuff yet. And in fact, when I ask you a question, I hope you will give me an answer. I hope you will interact with me and give me wrong answers. Wrong answers are awesome. I need to come up with a reward system. Whoever has the worst answer of the day, I'm going to give you a cookie or something. Because what that does for me is it sort of shows me where your thinking is on things, and I can tailor my explanations and my answers to sort of start at the level that you're at. You know, I try to, that helps me gauge where you are in your understanding. So interact with me. Don't be afraid to give me the wrong answer. In fact, I'm expecting wrong answers from you guys, okay? Now, I think we left off last class talking about population, right? So let's just have a little recap. What's happened to human population over the last 2 billion years, or 2 million years? Not much happened until when? 1830, 1800s, right about the Industrial Revolution, right? That's when we hit our first billion people. And then we added another billion in 60 years, 30 years, 10 years. And now we're adding about 1 billion people every 10 years, okay? It's a lot of people, right? So that's just sort of the big picture. Here on planet Earth, we really went crazy starting in the 1800s with cranking out kids, right? So we're going to, with the rest of the class, look at that in a little more detail. I know a lot of people are really worried about population growing to the point where it's going to start causing problems, okay? And in some parts of the world, it is. In some parts of the world, it isn't. You guys know what's going on with human population here in the United States? Do you know how many we have, first of all, roughly? It's about 300 to 350. Is it growing? Here in the U.S., it's staying pretty stable. It's actually gone up a little, but it's not because we're cranking out more babies. It's because of immigration. We're not going to give the whole political thing on immigration. It's just the fact that people have been moving here, and most of our population growth over the last 50 years has been through immigration. Not because our population is growing like in India or China because they're just cranking out lots of kids. So it's a little different here. Europe is the same way. Europe's actually declining a little bit. Australia's holding even. But yet you have countries like India, China, Bangladesh, Indonesia. They're still growing at an exponential rate. So it's kind of a bipolar world when it comes to this population growth stuff. And we're going to get into the details of that in a minute. So let's look at this from a different standpoint. The worry with population is that we're going to have so many people that we're going to use up so much stuff that's going to start negatively impacting us, right? So that's where this idea of carrying capacity comes in. How many people can the world support? We have somewhere around 7 to 8 billion people on planet Earth right now. Can planet Earth support 7 or 8 billion people? How many people are we going to have in 10 years? We're going to add another billion, right? 50 years from now, we're looking at 10 to 15 billion people. At some point, are we going to have so many people that's just too many, and the Earth can't provide? Remember what I said last class? Where does all this stuff come from? If it can't be grown in the Earth, it must be mined from the Earth. The Earth is what's providing us with all this stuff. At some point, will the Earth not be able to provide us with enough stuff? That's the question, right? So I looked into this. I think I talked about this a little last class. The estimates vary from 1.5 to 100 billion people. Okay, that's pretty wide range, right? If we have an Earth that can only hold 1.5 billion, then we've exceeded that a long time ago. And we should start seeing population-induced problems like starvation and sickness. Are we seeing starvation and sickness on some parts of the planet? Is it because we don't have enough? No, as it turns out, we have an excess supply of grain here in the United States. A lot of times we send that to countries in Africa as relief, and it never gets to the people. Why doesn't it get to the people? Because these countries are sometimes war-torn, because they have corrupt political leaders. It doesn't mean Earth isn't providing. It means, as humans, we kind of suck at getting resources to where they need to be. So it's difficult to say, oh, we have starvation in this part of Africa, or we have sickness in Bangladesh because there's too many people. Well, it might be because we suck at getting vaccinations to Bangladesh. It might suck because we can't get food, but it's there. Okay, so it's difficult to know if these problems are really because of population or because of structures we've created as human beings. So these different studies are what they are because of different assumptions that we have. You know, the 1.5 billion doom and gloom, oh my gosh, we're all going to die, we're all going to starve, we're all going to get sick. And then you have this 100 billion, you know, let's keep adding people, man. The world's just going to be greater and greater place if we add more people. So it's kind of all over the place, isn't it? Now, something I think most population dynamicists agree on is that one of the limiting factors might be, can we just simply produce enough food for people? Now, we should be able to produce enough water for everybody on the planet. We should be able to. Yes, most of the Earth is covered by ocean water. We can't drink ocean water. But we already have technologies that can create fresh water from ocean water. We have desalination plants. We can do this. We can provide enough water for everybody on the planet. We can do that. Again, we might lack the economics to be able to do that. We might lack politics. Might not be able to put it where there's war-torn countries, things like that. But we can already provide the world with water if we had the will to do so. Food, I don't know. Can we find enough food for 100 billion people? Not sure. So let's take a look at food for a moment. It's estimated right now that there are 7.9 billion acres of potential farmland worldwide. Okay, I know it just sounds like a big number, but you have something to compare this to. What's the population of planet Earth right now? Human population. It's about the same amount, right? 7.5 billion acres, 7-point-something billion people, right? Basically, it means there's about an acre of farmland per every person on the planet. Could you live on an acre's worth of food? Easily. Easily. So, in terms of that limit, we're still sitting pretty good. What's going to happen over time with the amount of food we can grow on that acre? Probably increase. You could think, well, you know, if we farm it too much, we'll take some of the nutrients out, it might lower its production, but what can we do? There's fertilizer, there's genetically modified seeds, there's irrigation, there's all these modern farming practices. Hell, do we even need ground to farm in to produce food anymore? You guys heard of hydroponics? They're doing it in places like Iceland. They're growing food on water. So we're coming up with these amazing ideas where we're getting more food out of an acre of farmland. We're able to grow food in places that we were never able to before. So in terms of farmland and food, should we be able to increase population for a while? Just from that standpoint, yeah. And as time goes on, we're going to get better and better at this. Okay? So, problem today, though, is that we don't have water at all potential farmland. Here in the U.S., we have great farmland. But we're dealing with water issues now. There isn't enough water available on the surface for all these farms. So farmers are starting to get a lot of water from the groundwater. But we're running out of that supply too. And water is becoming such a hot commodity in all regions of the U.S. that now people are competing for water. And what's happening here in Colorado, and you probably don't know this, is that we have lots of farmland out here in eastern Colorado, right? If you've ever flown over, you see the circles, the center pivot irrigation. In the middle of that circle is a well. It's a groundwater well. That's where all of that green comes from. So what happens is they put a well down, water comes up from the ground in that well, and it goes out through those arms that then swing around. Actually, there's a guy in Greeley that invented that whole system. The center pivot irrigation originated right here in Greeley. So it's kind of cool. But what's happening now is the water levels are lowering. And then you have cities like Denver, over 1 million people. And where do they get their water? The streams that come out of the mountains are tiny compared to the amount that 1 million plus people are going to use. So cities like Denver, Fort Collins, they've been sinking water wells down, and those wells are starting to go dry. So now what's happening is Denver is actually buying up farmland out here in Weld County, some of the surrounding communities, and they're buying it just for the water rights. So now those areas that were doing the nice circle crops, they're selling to the city, the crops are going away, so that the water can be transported to Denver for the growing urban population. So water dynamics is really difficult. And it's strange because we have this planet full of water, just salt water. We can desalinate it and turn it to fresh water. Why aren't we? Why aren't we massively desalinating ocean water to provide fresh water for the entire world? We know how to do it. There are places, you go to Saudi Arabia, they get most of their water from desalinating ocean water. Australia does it a lot too. Australia is really dry, and they desalinate water like crazy. Why aren't we doing this like everywhere? Same reason for lots of questions I'll ask you. It's expensive, and it's expensive because it requires a ridiculous amount of energy. It takes a lot of energy to extract that salt from salt water and leave fresh water behind. So it's an economic problem. We have the science to do it. Easy, simple. The economics, the engineering, lagging behind because of money. And that's here in a developed country. So you think about places like Angola in Africa. They don't have the infrastructure to be able to come up with these desalination plants, so they can't provide water for people and they can't provide water for farmland. So, yes, we have enough farmland for food. We don't have enough water at all the farmland. Could we have enough water at the farmland? Yes. Why don't we? Because of economics, because of engineering, but we could. So this is what goes on. What's going to happen with time, though? We're going to be able to do this more cheaply, right? We'll come up with ideas that desalinate water with less energy, that makes it more economically viable. So as time goes on, maybe we will be able to provide everywhere with water. And maybe it'll be somebody in the next 10 billion people that we're going to put on the planet in the next 10 years that will figure that out. So you've got one group of scientists that believes we should just keep adding people, because when we do that, we add ideas. And then you got other scientists that say, that's just stupid as hell, because we have 7.5 billion people, we're going to start struggling with resources. So there's this flip side to population. And we'll get into it more here in a minute. One thing we know, and one thing we are seeing problems with, is that we get a lot of food from the ocean. One thing you're going to see real quick is that most people on the planet live near the ocean. So the ocean provides food for lots of folks. And if we keep expanding the population, that increases the pressure on the ocean to provide food for us. And we're already seeing overfishing, especially in the Pacific. Our cultural want for food, sushi, is wiping out bluefin tuna population. So there are issues with population and food. And this is kind of interesting too. So we talked about water being available for farmland. The amount of water you need for farmland varies according to what's on your farm. And I'll give you two examples, really simple here. If you want to produce an acre's worth of corn, okay, let's say you have an acre, you can grow corn on it, right? That's going to require a certain amount of water. And in fact, to produce a ton of corn, you need 250,000 gallons of water. It's a lot of water. What if you want a ton of cow? I like cow. I'll admit, I'm not a vegetarian. I like red meat. I really like tasty cow. I don't want to give up my steak. I don't want to give up my burger. But you know how much water is required to produce a ton of cow? More or less. It's more. A little more? How much more? 300,000 gallons? It's higher. 500,000. It's higher. It's way higher than 1 million. 7.5 million gallons of water. 30 times more to have my burger. So I hear the cries out there saying, you know, we really need to move away from red meat. It's not the healthiest thing for you, and it really puts a lot of pressure on the earth in terms of especially water. I hear it. I hear it. I don't want to accept it. But if we keep adding people, at some point, we're all going to be forced to accept these realities. This is math. This is numbers. Math doesn't lie. You can try to political spin your way around numbers all you want, but at the end of the day, 7.5 million gallons, 30 times more water than 250,000. Even though I don't like it, that's a fact I have to deal with. Okay? So we may have to start making adjustments as humans to the types of food we consume. I have a former student, I kid you not, he grew up in India, and he has dedicated his life to making you eat insects. You guys have seen the Impossible Burger at Impossible Whopper at Burger King. It's made out of plants. He said, I can make you a much tastier burger made out of insects. And he is sort of pioneering a movement to get humans to eat more bugs. Because there are lots of bugs. You know, when you've got this huge biomass of plants, and then as you move up the food chain, you get less and less. Well, right above the plants are the insects. He goes, insects are tasty. I've eaten a lot of his stuff. I ate an insect burger once. I've eaten ants. I've eaten cockroaches. I've eaten all sorts of stuff. I like to eat weird crap. And you know what? It's pretty good. There are ants down in the Amazon. They taste like a margarita. They're awesome. They got kind of a limey taste to them. It's from the acid in them. They're tasty. If I could get a bowl of ants in the morning, that'd be great. Good stuff. So you will hear about eating plants this time, or insects as time goes on. All right, here's a map. I like maps. I think all geologists like maps. This shows where people are living on planet Earth. I want you to take just a second. Look closely at this map. And tell me sort of 3 or 4 general areas where people live. So the red areas are the highest population density on the planet. The white areas, you're not going to find people very easily. Where's the highest population densities on the planet? Southeast Asia, I mean right through here. Here we got China, right? And especially along the coast of China. See that? Lots of people along the coast. Where else are there lots of people? India, especially, this is interesting, right? Northern India, right? This swath of land up here. We're going to come back to that in a minute. So you got lots of people in Asia. In fact, the population of China is about 2.3 billion people. The population of India is about the same. Might even be more now. So between those two countries, we're looking at 4.6, 4.7 billion people. That's over half the human population in those two countries. Kind of interesting, huh? Where else do you see people?
They're more like, they're not in the north as much.
Okay, you've got sub-Saharan Africa right here, right? What about the Americas, North and South America? Where do people live in general? Coastlines, right? You see lots of people living on the coast. North African coast, right? Obviously coastline here. South America, West Coast, East Coast. Look at the U.S., West Coast, populated in the East Coast. So where do people live on planet Earth? Lots of folks in Asia. Lots of folks along coastlines. I think I read somewhere that over half the world's population lives within an hour's drive of a coastline. Why do people like living along coast? Pretty. What else? Historically, it's where people have had access to goods, shipping, trading. It's also where a lot of rivers empty out. It's where you can get lots of food from the ocean, reliably, not seasonally. So you've got trade routes, you've got an influx of fresh water, you've got a food supply. It's kind of what you need to create a society, right? So coastlines provide people with their daily needs. Europe. Europe's pretty densely populated. That's where people live. I always like asking the opposite question. Where don't people live? Somebody mentioned north, right? Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Siberia, northern parts of Europe. Why don't people live up there? Climate, right? Can't grow stuff. But that might be changing. Might see a greater influx of people to those regions as the rest of the world gets hot. Where else don't people live? Deserts. Where are you seeing deserts? Australia is a big desert, right? I'm sure you guys see this band, right? What's that? That's the Sahara. See this spot down here? That's the Kalahari and the Namib deserts. This is really interesting, I think. See the spot? I mean, look at this. Densely populated, one of the most densely populated places in the world, right? India. I mean, that band right there, there's so many people there. Anybody been to that part of the world? I'll show you some pictures. It's absolutely stunning how many people are there. But yet, right next to it, nobody's there. I mean, wouldn't you think some of these people would want to get out of the crowds? What's going on there? Anybody know? That's the Gobi Desert, another desert. There's just no water there. In fact, most of this is totally uninhabited, next to the two greatest population masses in the world. Just not enough water there for people to survive. The outback of Africa, even in the U.S., we're pretty sparsely populated in the continental West, aren't we? That's because it's arid here. Here in Greeley, we get less than 20 inches of rain a year. That's not enough to grow anything but sagebrush. So all of the agriculture that you see here, it's artificial. It's because we move water, either from the underground to the surface or we divert it out of the mountains. And it's not sustainable. It's just not. So we don't have people in the north because of the climate. We don't have people in the outback of Africa because it's a desert. Again, the climate. The Sahara, Namib, Kalahari, all in Africa. I guess with the north we could also say the south. It's not showing up on here, but we do have Antarctica. Nobody really living down there except a bunch of crazy scientists. Western U.S. One of the only places that's really uninhabited but yet has a huge biomass growth is the Amazon basin. And it's just so thickly vegetated that it makes it difficult for people to live there as well. Okay, what I have for you next, and I hope it works, is I have like a 3 or 4 minute animation video that's going to show what's happened to population over the last 2,000 years. I think it's really cool. Okay, so 2,000 years ago, how many people were on planet Earth 2,000 years ago? I didn't give you an exact number, but tell me as much as you know. Less than 1 billion people, right? That's about all you can say. It was about 300 million people worldwide. So basically, 2,000 years ago, the Earth as a whole had the same number of people that we have in the United States today. Okay, it was just spread out all over planet Earth. But it wasn't evenly spread out. Some areas had more people, some places didn't have many people at all. And then what this video will do is it will show you the additions of people. It's going to have yellow dots. Okay, each dot is 1 million people. Okay, so it's going to start out with about 300 dots, 300 million people, and it's going to grow to what we have today. And you'll see it year by year by year. And you'll also see along the bottom, it shows historical events. It'll show the Crusades. It'll show the Mongolian invasion. It'll show you the Black Plague, Roman Empire, Mayan Empire, Aztec Empire. And you'll see whether that affected population at all. So it's kind of interesting. It's a worldview of population growth over time, sort of tied to historical events. Okay? So I'm just going to let it go. I'll talk a little bit through it, but you'll just get, I think, an appreciation for what humans have been doing with respect to procreating over the last 2,000 years. I really hope this works. Let's see. Sounds.
The Earth is our environment. The capacity of our environment to provide space, produce food, supply energy are all limited. Humans thrive on less than 70% of the Earth's surface, only about 4% to grow crops. We depend on these limited resources for our survival. Yet we are increasing our population as if they were infinite. This fact is at the core of our environmental progress. On this map, we'll show population growth from the year 1 CE to the present, project our growth into the year 2050. Population concentrations will be indicated by dots, each of which will represent 1 million people. In areas where people are spread out, the living concentrations of 1 million, dots are placed in the middle of their approximate range. Historical references will be provided by images and text at the bottom of the screen.
Okay, 2,000 years ago, where are people living? Okay, you still see this band across northern India, right? China. What's going on in the Americas? We have 1 dot, 2 dots in North America, right? So about 2 million people. Native populations mostly on the west coast. So this is the Roman Empire. This area. Is it affecting population? See much going on? Not much going on, right? Golden age of India. A lot of dots being added. Not much going on so far. We're about a quarter of the way through the exercise already. Has the map changed much? Looks pretty much the same, right? Added a few dots. The Mayans, Central America. I don't see much going on there. Spread of Islam. See many dots popping up there? Do you see dots go away on occasion? Map looks sort of like it did at the beginning, doesn't it? Just a few more dots. The pattern's the same. All right, we're almost halfway through the exercise. Map kind of looks the same, right? Where are most of the dots being added now? Yeah, same places where they existed in China. China, the Crusades, Europe. My favorite one's coming up for a really horrible reason. Mongol invasion. Watch what happens to China. What do you see going on? Yeah, the Mongolians killed 30 million Chinese during that time. The greatest extermination of human life by other humans ever. 30 million people killed by the Mongols. All right, Columbus is about to go over to North America, right? There he is. Landed at Plymouth Rock. What's going on in the U.S.? We're almost 100 years after Columbus landed. Doesn't look much different, does it? Colonial America. All right, 1776 is coming. All right, look at the U.S. Okay, we do have some people on the East Coast. Oh, getting busy. Now watch the industrial. I'm just going to let this go. Okay, I'm born right now. Here we are now. And there we are maybe in 2050. It's pretty stunning, huh?
Population is expected to grow to 10 billion by the end of the century.
Probably more.
Yet the Earth's size remains the same. Slowing human population growth and lowering our use of natural resources are key to reducing the impact we have on the planet. Through the decisions we make about our lifestyles, our numbers, and our consumption, we can all help preserve the health and beauty of our home.
Okay, I like that. Hopefully it, sometimes numbers don't tell you the whole story. And I think this is one case where a good animation is pretty useful. Okay, so you guys have probably heard through popular media, news reports or whatever, that some parts of the world have more problems with population than the other. What's the one country that always seems to come up when we talk about human population and problems? You hear about China, you hear about India, sometimes you hear about sub-Saharan Africa, but definitely China, sometimes India. So we know that there's basically 60% of our population just sitting over in Southeast Asia, Indochina. Now, Africa doesn't, as a continent, doesn't have nearly the population that we have in Southeast Asia, but they have a lot of issues. They have issues growing food, they have a lot of issues with water, And sadly, for the last probably 100 years or so, they've had a real problem with political unrest in a lot of the countries. So even though lots of well-intentioned folks from outside the African continent have tried to intercede and send support, sad reality remains is that a lot of the aid that we send to some of these African countries never gets to the people. It's commandeered by warlords, corrupt politicians. Now what's interesting is here in the U.S. we only have 4% of the world's population. Between 4 and 5. And our population isn't growing except for a little bit of immigration. And we have lots of farmland. The whole middle part of the United States, most of the eastern part of the U.S. as well, is very well suited for growing things. And there's water at a lot of the farmland, especially in the Midwest. But out in the West, not so much. So water is becoming an issue in places like eastern Colorado. So we have it good in some respects. Our population isn't growing. We have great infrastructure. We have 2 coastlines. We have good climate for growing things. We're not too far north. So it's, from a population standpoint, it's good to be an American. Okay? It's a good thing. But it also gives us a warped sense of reality, too, because the rest of the world's not like this. The rest of the world has some real issues. Here's our 10 most populated countries. I don't care if you write this down. You can get this list anywhere. But you see India and China right there at the top. The U.S. is the 3rd most populated country, but again, that only adds up to about 4.6%. Indonesia, southeast part of the Pacific, very tiny landmass. Basically, it's about 10,000 islands. But they have almost the same population as here in the U.S. Really, really densely populated. And you can see the rest of the list here. And that actually accounts for most of the world. All right, let's look at a couple of countries. All right, this is China. This is India. I went to India back in 2015, spent a week in the northern part, right up in here where all the people are. This is a photo I took of the old part of Delhi. And I don't know, you guys see that very well? You see all the wires? It's like that everywhere. The problem in places like India and China is that the population is growing so fast that the government cannot create infrastructure quick enough to provide people with the stuff they need. And in fact, they have so many people, they just don't have enough electricity for everybody. So what happens, and this is, I've seen it happen, is that people will be living in these buildings, they will shimmy out on these electrical wires, hook up their own wire to it, and then bring that wire back into their house to run their, they do their own electricity. They steal electricity from the grid. And people die doing it. It's crazy because you'll see monkeys running across here, peeing on the wires, peeing on the people below, and there'll be people out on there, and then all these wires. It's estimated that 25% of India's power is stolen by population who just can't get it. And the other 20%, another 25% of the power is just lost because it's such a shitty system. You know, that wires don't conduct the electricity well. They heat up, they lose power. So 50% of the power in India is just gone, either stolen or lost. And this is at a time when the population is growing so fast that the government can't get infrastructure to people. And this is really sad too. When you go to India, what did we say the population was? About 1.2 billion. 2/3 of the people in India don't have toilets. They don't have toilets. If you don't have a toilet, where do you go to the bathroom? Everywhere. Everywhere. I took a train through India, and I kid you not, we were going past the school, and kids were out during recess, and they were playing soccer, and they were all playing soccer, and along the edge of the soccer field, There were kids. They were spaced about, there's like a social distancing thing that goes on there. They're spaced about as far apart as you are. They're all squatting down, taking a dump. They just do it on the edge of the playgrounds. When you walk around, there's just piles of crap everywhere because they can't go anywhere else. They're trying to get toilets to people, but they can only create toilets so fast, and sadly we create people faster than we can create toilets. 800 million people in India go to the bathroom outside. You know, some of you may have gone outside when you went camping once. You know, you probably bitched and moaned about it the whole damn time. So, yeah, I could show you. I have some interesting photos of India. So there's a street in India. You see cows on the street, you see horses on the street, you see tuk-tuks on the street, you see bikes on the street. The one thing you rarely see on the road are cars. Everything but cars. Okay, so here's a map of China. Okay, where do you notice people live? Over here, right? Inland, here. But then there's areas that are completely uninhabited. Why? All has to do with the availability of water. So I'm going to put a map up of rainfall of China right over the top. So remember this pattern. This is population. Next one's going to be rainfall. Darker blue areas, highest rainfall. Light blue areas, lowest rainfall. What do you notice? Patterns look the same, right? People are living where they find water. Water is probably our most basic human need, you know? We can go days without food, can't go days without water. So population, people live where they get the things they need to stay alive. In China, population is controlled by water, like that in most places on Earth. We need water to drink, we need water to produce food. But it comes at a price. When you stick that many people into a small area, you start to get issues. All those people in China, they want what you have. They want the cell phone. They want the automobile. They want electricity that's available 24/7. They want warm buildings in the winter. They want cool buildings in the summer. All that requires energy. The easiest form of energy that we have to produce electricity is to burn coal. And if you have a big country, lots of people, you're going to do what's cheapest. This is downtown Beijing on a normal day. That is not fog. That is exhaust from coal-fired electricity plants that sit on the outside of Beijing. It is like this most of the year. I had a friend who worked in this building. He said there were days where he could look out his window and not see that. Doesn't make for much of an exciting picture when all of it looks like this, but there are days when all of it. Next, just to provide them with electricity. Do you think the people in China want to live like this? Do you think the Chinese government wants their citizens to live like this? No. They want to solve these problems. They're trying to solve these problems. China leads the world in solar panel production. They're trying to move away from coal fire. They're trying to do the right thing. But we keep creating people faster than we can create solutions. Yeah. Why doesn't the U.S. I was born in 1962, and if you went to Los Angeles in the 1970s, it never looked that bad, but it looked pretty damn close. If you went to Cleveland, Ohio in the 1970s, there were days where, you know how it's been lately with the fires? It looked like that or worse all the damn time. But in the mid-1970s, we went through an environmental revolution here in the United States. We passed the Clean Water Act. We passed the Clean Air Act. We came up with environmental laws that prevented exactly this. Now, it came at a cost. It actually costs us more to live in this sort of environment where we have clean air and clean water. It costs us more. You just don't notice it because it's all background. But what you pay for electricity, you're paying for electricity that's a little more expensive because our coal-fired plants are not allowed to produce as much pollution. They have to come up with new engineering and new technology, and that gets passed on to you. But we're an affluent country, you know? So as a collective whole, we're able to pay for it. China, they just keep cranking people out, and they can't keep up. So they have to go with the cheapest form of energy production just to give China enough energy to go through their basic daily routines. If we were expanding population like China was, we'd have a hard time keeping the air and water as clean as it is. So it's good to be us. Yeah, I remember a time where the U.S. was polluted. There were rivers in the Midwest that were green from all the pollution. I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, okay? It's not a heavily populated place, but it's where most of the toilet paper in the United States is manufactured. And all the toilet paper companies were right on the Fox River. And they would just dump all of their pollution in the Fox River. You could almost walk across it. It was so polluted. Today it's beautiful because of environmental laws. But we pay more for our toilet paper here because of it, because they have to have technologies that are a little more expensive to do the work cleanly. So we pay for it. But we can pay for it because we're not adding a ridiculous amount of people every year. This is what it looks like from the air some days. So these white clouds here, this is China, okay? So this is just clouds out in the ocean. This is not clouds of precipitation. That's pollution. And you notice it doesn't just stay over China, right? Actually, some pollution that we get on the west coast of the U.S., in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, some of it comes from China. It goes completely across the Pacific Ocean. So it affects more than China. Hong Kong, which is an island nation off over here, very clean country on its own. The air quality is horrible because it just blows in from China. It looks like Fort Collins has looked all week at smoke fires. It's that dirty. And they don't produce hardly any pollution at all. So one of the problems with having a big population is pollution. Isn't that lovely? When you're done using something, what do you do with it? You throw it in that bin over there, right? After you throw it in there, do you give it any thought? You think, damn, what happened to my cup that I threw in that trash can this morning? You don't give it any thought, right? When you come back tomorrow, that trash can is going to be empty, right? At home, you get a bag of garbage. What do you do with it? You put it in this bin, right? And then probably like every Thursday or Tuesday or whatever, you roll it out to the street, and you come back at the end of the day, and that baby's empty, right? It's like magic. You know, I talk about stuff coming out of the walls. Garbage is invisible too. We just put it out there and it disappears, right? We have this infrastructure that takes our waste, delivers it to landfills, and relatively cleanly disposes of it. What if you brought that garbage up your street today, and you came back tonight and it was still there? And you came back tomorrow and it was still there. And next Thursday, you got another old trash bin, and the garbage is still there. What if it never goes away? What do you do? You've never had to deal with that, have you? Well, that's the way it is in lots of the developing world. They do not have the infrastructure to move trash away. What do you do with your trash? What would your options be if nobody ever picked up your trash? What would you do with it? You could try to bury it, right? But you can only bury so much, right?
Burn it.
Burning it. Now, what if everybody on your street burnt their frickin' garbage? It's bad because some stuff, when you burn it, it's pretty lethal, right? But yet you go to India, and every night people move their trash out the street and they burn it. Where do most people on the planet live? Coastlines, right? Or along waterways. Back on that photo or that map I showed of India, remember how many people were living in northern India? Well, it's not a coastline, right? But it is the Ganges River, which is their major waterway. And it's a religious collection as well. So people love living along rivers. Well, if you have garbage and you live along a river, or if you're on the coastline and you have garbage, what's the reality? Where's that garbage going to end up? Yeah, you'd see it. I've been to the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, and a lot of people, their homes are on stilts above the Mekong. The Mekong goes through these ridiculous flood stages. Come up 20, 30 feet, come right to the base of their house, and then during the dry season it goes down 20 feet. But, you got garbage. I can burn it, but it's raining. It doesn't burn well in the rain. Nobody's going to pick it up. Where's that garbage going to go? They just shove it right out the back door, right into the river. And you know what's great about rivers? River's going to take that crap and off it goes, right? It's a problem for everybody downstream, but it moves your garbage away. Or if you're on the ocean. So this is China. What do you think of that? That's what a lot of rivers look like in China. They don't have our environmental regulations. I have a photo I took in India, and I'm not kidding. There was so much garbage mounted up on top of the river that dogs were walking across it to get from one side of the river to the other. The garbage was piled up probably 5 or 6 feet thick. You could walk across the river on the garbage. I have a cool photo. I'll try to bring it sometime. I took this. Yeah, go ahead. What's that? I don't know what that guy was doing in that photo, but I'll show you a photo in a minute where you will see something. I took this photo in Myanmar, Burma. Okay, this is a well. These women are pumping water out of the ground next to a lake. And this photo doesn't show well, but this lake is full of garbage. It's just, there's garbage everywhere. You can see a little bit over here. These are like plastic bags and crap. So that well probably goes down 5 or 6 feet. Where's the water coming from that they're sucking out of the well? Yeah, it's the lake water moving through the soil. So basically they're just sucking this water through the well and they're drinking it. Now the soil filters out the plastic bags and the pieces of poop and everything else, but that's still not the nicest water, is it? This just breaks my heart. You ever had to do anything like that? That's reality for a lot of people in the world. Diarrhea is one of the leading causes of death in some of these countries, and it's because of dirty water. Yeah, I've seen people, I saw it we went to Cambodia a few years ago, and we were out on a boat, and there's just trash everywhere, and we watched a kid on the same boat push the trash away, put his cup in, get the water, and just drink it. That would kill any of us. And sadly, it does kill some of them, but their stomachs have adapted to be able to at least drink some of it. But that's what happened in countries where the population grows so fast that everybody lives in economic conditions that don't allow them access to clean food and water. You guys have it really good. Even as poor college students, you guys have a very impressive lifestyle. I'm going to skip over this. Okay, so we know that population in some parts of the world is causing real problems. And we don't want problems for our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world. We're all humans. I mean, honestly, we like to talk in this country about hard work. You know, if you work hard, you'll be able to rise up and you'll be able to have a good life. If you go to college, you'll be able to get a good job, and your lifestyle is going to depend on your hard work, and some of it does, but let's be honest. You guys hit the lottery just based on where you were born, and so did I. You can work as hard as you want, but if you're born in one of these environments that doesn't have the infrastructure, the likelihood of making it out of there is slim. Okay? It just is. So we should care about our brothers and sisters elsewhere, because that could have easily been us, each and every one of us. Okay? What should we do about world population? Should we do anything about it? We don't think about it much in the U.S. because we don't have problems with it. But what about India, China? What has China done? China's actually tried to tackle this. What do you guys know about China? Yeah, for a lot of years they had a one-child-only policy. Okay, they were trying to get on top of this. It was very well intentioned, and it kind of turned out terrible. Because there's always culture, there's always religion. And in many parts of China, especially rural China, it saddens me to say it, but it's truth, boys are more prized than women. You only get one kid though, right? What if you have a baby girl? Crap, didn't hit the lottery there, we got a girl. Well, what ended up happening is that lots of families would take their baby girl, just dump the baby at an orphanage, and then try again for a boy. So orphanages were overrun with Chinese baby girls. And in fact, lots of people from the U.S. are adopting little Chinese girls to try to get them out of that environment. And that's culture playing a role. The other thing that they didn't anticipate is China has a big population, right? And then they put in this one-child act. So the younger generation doesn't have many people, right? Because there's one child. But now they have this aging, huge population, and they got lots of old Chinese people, and they're getting to retirement age. Who is going to make the money and create the infrastructure for all those aging Chinese people? A very tiny population of young Chinese. There's not enough young Chinese people to support the aging population. So now they've relaxed it and said, oh, you can have more kids, you just have to apply to the government and you can have more than one kid. But now culture has changed in a lot of parts of China and they like only having one kid. So now they have people who aren't even taking them up on it. So they have real problems going forward. It was really well intentioned, but there's going to be some consequences of it. India, if you go there, it's really weird because India is basically doing nothing. India doesn't want to do anything. And if you know about India, they have a caste system where they have people low on the totem pole, people high on the totem pole. I think it was back in the 40s or 50s. They had mass sterilization of the people on the low end of the totem pole. They're called the Dalits. And they sterilized lots of because they didn't want all these low-class people breeding like crazy. And it's left a bad taste in India's collective mouth. And nobody even wants to talk about population control because they say, you sterilized people in the past. We're not going to listen to the government on this. So India has this horrid history that's actually preventing them from doing anything. Education. Should we educate people about this? You bet we should. You think that's going to be enough to change the population problem? Are people in India educated? They are. Even in the rural areas, good education system. They know about this, but because of history and culture, they're not going to do much about it. Do you think birth control is the answer? I see some of you shaking your heads no. Why not? Why aren't we doing birth control everywhere? Seems pretty simple, right? Yeah, in many places there's a religious impediment for birth control. I read about this initiative where they airdropped a bunch of condoms into a rural area in one of the African countries. And then they showed up like 6 months later to, see what was happening with the condoms. And the condoms are being used. The women were carrying water in them. So unless you're going to go there and manually apply them or explain how it takes more than simple solutions for this. Maybe there's some other ideas out there to curb population. How many of you have heard of Al Gore? Al Gore thinks he knows the solution to solving the world's population problem. Most of you know Al Gore, former vice president, lost the presidential race back in the early 2000s by the slimmest of margins. He's been traveling the world talking about climate change more recently. But he has some strong views on the world's population problem. And politics aside, a lot of people agree with Al Gore on what we should do about population. Anybody know what it is? All right, I'll set it up for you. Here in the United States, is our population growing naturally? It's not. You know, we've stabilized our population. We're not growing like India and China. If you go to Europe, their population's actually declining slightly. If you go to Australia, their population's holding even. But yet you've got India, parts of Africa, China, populations going through the roof. What's different about the US, Europe, Australia than China, India, parts of Africa? You think of anything that's different about those countries, societies, that would impact population? Well, not the main reason, but there is a component to it. We'll get to that. I'll ask you this. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Half the class women, okay? And just going to guess you're all childbearing age. You don't have to answer my question, but how many of you have kids? No. Here we have 5 women, childbearing age, and no kids. Late teens, 20s, no kids. If you went to rural China, rural India, and collected 5 girls around the age of 20 together and asked them if they had kids, what answer would you get? They probably have 4 or 5 kids by now. Okay? They start cranking them out right as they're biologically able to. By the time you're 20, you have a family because you're living in this rural area and you need to produce the workforce to work the land to provide food. Women in these countries do not have the options that they have in more developed countries. Now, by no means are women and men equal even in the developed world. But you guys have opportunities, right? Why are you in college? How many of the women in here want a career? Does having a career affect the number of kids and when you will have them? You're going to delay childbirth, right? I mean, it's damn hard to go to school with a kid, right? Hard to go to school anyway. Add a couple kids to the equation, you make it really hard, right? So that's why most women in college, you're not seeing kids. They're delaying childbirth. And then are they going to crank out 5 kids once they have a career? No, so by providing opportunities to women, and in the United States, Europe, Australia, women have far more avenues for chasing a career than they do in some of these other parts of the world. So Al Gore's solution is if you give women opportunities for careers, advancement, education, livelihood, population is going to take care of itself. They are going to have less kids, and they're going to delay when they're having kids. So it's the empowerment of women that is Al Gore's solution to all this. So it's something to think about. So instead of sterilizing people and forcing people to only have 1 kid, it may be much better for the population and certainly much better for the individuals to provide women with avenues for education and careers if they so want to do so. So we've been talking about population very negatively so far. And clearly there are some problems with population. But population may have some good aspects to it as well. Maybe we're not at our carrying capacity. Maybe the Earth can really handle another 7.5 billion people. And actually there's some people out there that argue that we shouldn't be limiting population at all. In fact, we should be encouraging people to have more kids. They will say that, you know what? If we add another 10 billion people in the next 10 years, the world's going to be a better place for humans. I'll ask, sounds okay, yeah, you're looking at me like, what the hell are you saying? What's wrong with you? I'll ask you this. In terms of living a long, healthy life, would you rather be alive today when there's 7.5 billion people or 2,000 years ago when there's only 300 million? Yeah, we live to 80 years old today, right? You'd be old at 30. We're able to live long today because of, why are we living so long? Medicine. Where does medicine come from? It comes from your brain, right? We have better buildings, right? We have better ways of predicting natural disasters. All of that requires human ingenuity. And the argument is if we add another billion people, we add another billion brains, and we add another billion people's worth of ideas. And maybe we should add some more people so that we can come up with ideas for solving some of these problems rather than just curtailing population growth. So again, in terms of longevity, health, prosperity, today's world's pretty good. Now, living here in the U.S. for these things obviously makes it better than living in some other places. I want to come back to this idea of carrying capacity. I think I mentioned it a little last class with deer. I gave you the deer example. And I said that there's estimates of what the carrying capacity is of Earth. They range from 1.5 billion to 100 billion people. If you take the low end, it means we've exceeded carrying capacity and we're going to be having lots of problems. If you take the high end, it means we can add an awful lot of people and we'll still be okay. All these studies give you different numbers because they're based on different assumptions. And one way you can think about this is the boomster versus doomster idea. So back in the late 1970s, early 1980s, that's when here in the United States, we started taking note of how population was expanding worldwide. And biologists and ecologists were saying, you know, we're adding 1 billion people every 10 years now. At some point, it seems reasonable to think that we're going to have more people than the Earth can support. And we're going to start seeing problems. And we should start doing something about this. This was where China's one-child policy sort of came from, was this time back in the 1980s where everybody's saying, oh my God, we're at 4 billion people now, and it's really getting increased. You saw the video, right? You saw what happened during that time. Dots going up as fast as you can. It's like, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep doing this. Well, there was a guy, his name was Julian Simon. He's an economics professor. And he's a boomster, okay? He wasn't buying any of this gloom and doom talk that population was a bad thing. In fact, he's an economist. Okay? Pick 5 resources at 1975 prices, and then we'll see what they're worth in 1985. And you can pick any resource you want. The ones you are just sure are going to go up in price. If you think oil is going to go up in price, pick that. We're going to look at wholesale prices because retail prices have middlemen, and has to be adjusted for inflation because inflation is the natural expansion of economies and price increases. So we're going to look at wholesale prices, and in 10 years, all that shit's going to be cheaper. And as it turns out, every resource that Ehrlich picked was cheaper. Every single one. And he paid us $1,000. Now, does that mean population growth is a good thing? Is looking at it from an economic standpoint the only way to look at it? We'll finish this up next class, but I'll leave you with this. We have 7.5 billion people on the planet, right? That's a lot of people to create ideas. Do you think every person's idea on planet Earth really matters? We'd like to say it does, but if you're a girl growing up in rural India, you might have an Einstein-like mind, right? Are you ever going to be able to capitalize on your ideas? No, so rather than adding 1 billion people, I would rather change culture and infrastructure so that every person's ideas that we have here now actually have an avenue to making those become reality. So we'll finish it up next class. There's just a page of notes or so, but I will see you all next week.